Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Zero Hour. Our next guest is a comedian and author and a good friend of mine, Jimmy Dore, D-O-R-E. Jimmy Dore is the author of the new book, Your Country Is Just Not That Into You. He is a frequent co-host on The Young Turks. He is a comedian who has appeared in many major venues, and he is a political observer of note. Jimmy, thanks for joining us, and I want to lead right into a question that I think will resonate with you. We've got an election coming up in just a few days. We've got a lot of people who are torn about how to vote, but look, you've been making the point in your book and elsewhere that the corporations have undue influence over both parties, especially at the national level, and that they limit the debate to very specific topics, ones that don't threaten them. And this is, I think, an important topic, and it's especially played out in the last presidential election. The presidential election can turn into something more like a job interview where you got your two finalists and you're really saying, okay, we got the job description, communicate certain policies and economic realities to the target audience in a way that will be well received. It could be argued that Mitt Romney's biggest flaw was that when he made that remark about 47% of the people don't want to work or whatever, he's just not as good a communicator. We're going to have, Mitt, you are a good, strong candidate, but we're going to have to go in another direction.
My point is that it's not about the gaps they make on the campaign trail. It's that they're both owned by the same people. Barack Obama and Mitt Romney are owned, and their policies are effectively the same, right? Which is my whole point in the book, right? It's not a left-right dynamic anymore. Sure, Barack Obama cares a little bit more about a woman's right to choose and a little bit more about a woman's equal pay. But when it comes to screwing over workers, unions, and outsourcing jobs to third-world countries and an inevitable endless wars that are called for by the military-industrial complex, he's exactly like the Republicans. So this is my point, right? If Barack Obama was a lefty, he would have proposed Medicare for all because that's what lefties think is a good way to tackle our healthcare problems. But he didn't. He proposed the Heritage Foundation's solution to our healthcare problems because there is no left in America. And what really enables that, the corporate takeover of both parties, is that the corporations got smart. There used to be a watchdog in America, and it was called the news media. Journalism is such an important occupation that the framers, it's one of these three occupations that are contained in the Constitution. So a healthy fourth estate is really necessary for our democracy to function properly. And it used to be that guys like 60 Minutes and Walter Cronkite used to keep an eye on the corporations to make sure they didn't get too cozy with our congressmen. But what has happened is that the criminals got smart and they bought the watchdog. So now the watchdog works for the criminals. And that's what I'm talking about. Like the biggest news story of the last decade had to be the Iraq War, right? So if I look to the number one newsman in the country, Brian Williams, and I look to him to get information about the number one news story, which was the Iraq War, well, guess what? Brian Williams worked for General Electric the whole time the Iraq War was happening. General Electric is a huge defense contractor. And my question to Brian Williams is, how many checks do you take from a defense contractor in the middle of an illegal war before you stop calling yourself a journalist? And the answer to that is endless checks. So it gets worse than that, RJ. Brian Williams brought on generals that were retired to give us a straight dope about the Iraq War so we could make an informed decision as an electorate. What he didn't tell us was that those generals were all being paid by defense contractors, so they weren't telling us the truth. They were corrupted. And the guy who revealed that to us won a Pulitzer Prize for it in the New York Times. Brian Williams never told us about it. So the number one news story of the last decade, the Iraq War, our number one newsman not only fell down on the job, but actively corrupted and misinformed us. And that's why we're living in a state of perpetual war. It's the way they report things. Go ahead.
And I'm going to jump in here now. Just to say, you left somebody out of that equation too, which is MSNBC, which everybody thinks of as the liberal news network. They have had a lot of the same generals on without, maybe now I think Rachel Maddow has begun to point out their corporate affiliations, but MSNBC has been just as bad as Brian Williams in terms of featuring these guys as the experts. And I guess that gets to part of what I wanted to say here, which is, I don't necessarily criticize people in fact, I don't at all criticize people for voting Democratic and racist or whatever they feel, is the right thing to do. What I think the real underlying problem here is that we've got a situation where the supposedly leftmost wing of the debate, whether it's what you hear on MSNBC or what you see from Democratic candidates like Barack Obama, that's supposed to be the leftmost wing. And when that gets moved more and more into the corporate side of the ledger, you're not really hearing both sides of the story, are you?
No, that's the whole point. Our modern newsman has mistaken neutrality for objectivity. For instance, you can be an objective journalist and say the Vietnam War is lost, which is what Walter Cronkite did. So that's an objective fact that he was able to report. And now, today, the equivalent of that would be if he was a newsman today, he would say, hey, climate change is a fact. Objectively, that's a fact. But that's not what they do, right? So Chuck Todd will bring on Bill Nye the Science Guy, and then he'll bring on a ridiculous, backward-thinking senator from Tennessee, which he's done, and then he'll have them debate climate change. Hey, genius, that's not a debate. There is no debate about climate change, but he's pretending there is. So he goes, oh, look, he says there is climate change. The senator from Tennessee says there isn't. I reported both sides of the debate as if they're equal. That's neutrality masquerading as objectivity. You couldn't report sports that way. As my friend Cenk Uygur says, hey, the Cubs played the Dodgers last night. The Dodgers said they won 5-4. The Cubs said they won 5-4. Who really won? I guess we'll never know. But that's how you couldn't report sports that way, but the most important stories of our generation gets reported that way. And that's the real failing of our news media.
Well, it certainly is, but I guess what it gets to then, we're talking with Jimmy Dore, comedian, author of Your Country's Just Not That Into You. By the way, are you going to name all your books after romantic comedy movies? I'm thinking that 10 Things Your Country Hates About You could be the sequel.
I like the, I'm thinking Your Country's Still Not That Into You.
Right. But, you raise a lot of great points in this book, and I always enjoy doing the 0 Hour with you. I'm sorry, this is the 0 Hour. Hello, reset. I always enjoy doing the Young Turks with you because, we appear, I always appreciate your perspective on this stuff. But, the breakdown of the news media, that's one of the reasons why I feel it's important to do a show like this. That's one of the reasons why our friend Cenk is providing such a great service by doing the Young Turks. But who else is great on this is Bill Moyers, who's written a lot about corporate ownership of the media. And that's a guy who's been around to see how the media got co-opted. But it's not just the media. I mean, don't voters have a certain sense of obligation in all of this too?
Well, I think it's the corporation. If you look at the way people get in their information, they still get it from the mass media, and they don't realize that it's been taken over by the criminals because they don't tell them, right? So, people are busy working 3 jobs, as George Bush would say. Isn't that great? Isn't that uniquely American? Yes, it is. And it's horrible that people are working. Right now, we're living in record corporate profits. People aren't aware of that either. Record corporate profits, Wall Street also making record profits. At the same time, workers are poorer than ever. There's a bigger income disparity right now than there was during the Gilded Age because corporations are sitting on $5 trillion in profits and they're not investing it in our economy. And they say it's because they don't have confidence, RJ. And you know what I say? If $5 trillion doesn't give you confidence, I would try dance lessons.
Right, Dale Carnegie would be good too.
Yes. So, and that's the kind of stuff I talk about in the book. Your Country's Just Not That Into You. I like to make serious points about how we're being screwed by the people who own the country, but at the same time, I like to put a lot of jokes in there because I've been a comedian for 25 years, and my last hour special for Comedy Central was actually chosen Best of the Year by iTunes. And the reason I tell you that, RJ, because it turns out if I don't, nobody will. So that's why I'm bringing it up. And I'm getting ready to take my new special, by the way, November 7th in North Hollywood at the El Portal Theater. So if anybody's around, I would love to have them come out and watch me take my special.
Well, I'm very upset to hear that. And the reason why I'm upset to hear that is that I don't recall being invited to that event or even being told that event was coming up.
You know what? They just, it was a recent offer They just made an offer to me about a month and a half ago to come do another hour special, and I was like, of course, let's do it. So
month and a half ago, I saw you last week at the Young Turks.
And I didn't.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
The tickets are free, so it's a TV taping, so we don't charge people to come to a TV taping. But that's going to be next Friday, November 7th, 9:30 at the El Portal. And but right now I'm talking about the book, and that's the important thing, that your country is just not that into you. And, you were talking about MSNBC, RJ. I make the point in the book that people like to say, oh, the media is liberal. Well, so those are conservatives who have effectively made their listeners and followers live in a little bubble, and anything that doesn't come from Drudge or Fox News can't be trusted, right? Because actual news, actual facts are called liberal. That's like Stephen Colbert said, reality has a liberal bent. And what that means is reality is liberal according to a conservative. It goes against the conservative narrative where Ronald Reagan never raised taxes, and if you don't tell kids about sex, they won't get pregnant. Okay? And if the news media is liberal, then why is it being funded? Because if you look, who are the commercials supporting the major news shows, right? Well, it's Walmart, it's oil companies, it's the military-industrial complex, and drug companies. They're funding the liberal news media? That sounds like BS to me, and it is BS. Because what the news media is supposed to do is investigate those companies and find out their corruption. So you're telling me Walmart is giving Brian Williams money to investigate them? No. The reason why Walmart sponsors NBC News is they're sponsoring non-investigations. That's exactly why Archer Daniels Midland funded NBC's Meet the Press all those years, because they didn't want news people investigating them. And that's exactly what has happened. They're not investigating them. The criminals own the country, and we're all being screwed.
See, here's what we're talking with comedian Jimmy Dore about his new book, The 10 Things Your Country Hates About You. No, what's it called? You'll tell me.
Your country is just not that into you.
Your country's just not that into you. We're going to take a quick break in a minute, but here's what I want to talk to you about when we come back from the break, Jimmy, is that it's very, very easy to recognize that the system is screwing us, that we're being, manipulated, that the political system isn't raising all the options that are open to us as a society, et cetera, et cetera. News media is corrupted and so on. The question that we get into is, what can we do about it? How do we avoid getting into cynicism and despair? So what the hell are you doing, by the way? What is that noise?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm scrambling an egg.
You're scrambling an egg. All right. Well,
I didn't know you could hear me. I apologize.
This is your country on drugs. Well, you know what? We're going to come back after the break, so your egg may get over. I hope you like them well done, because it ain't going to be over easy, pal. We got a few more minutes of discussion when we come back.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so we're going to take a break in a minute. We're talking with Jimmy Dore, and I don't care if tickets are free to your upcoming special. I still want to be on the guest list because I have ego issues.
Okay, you are. No problem. Of course you're on the guest list.
All right, we will be right back after this with more from Jimmy Dore, comedian and author of Your Country's Just Not That Into You. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. And we are back on the Zero Hour with comedian and author Jimmy Dore. His new book is Your Country Is Just Not That Into You. I should say comedian, author, and celebrity chef. The sound of that, at one point during the conversation, I used the word reset, and then I heard a series of rapid clicks come through your phone, and I thought, Jimmy's an android. I had no idea. But you're still with us, right?
In the flesh. There's no android thing happening.
Oh, good. Okay. You were so quiet after we mentioned the background noise. I was afraid we'd lost you. Okay. So my question was this. Okay, here we are. We got an election coming up on Tuesday. We just learned through, I follow economic news. We just learned that all the wealth the middle class has accumulated basically since World War II has now been dissipated as a result of the wealth robbery by the top 0.1%, top 1%, top 10%. So the 90% of us have just lost everything we have ever gained. How do we keep hammering? And I'm talking to you as another communicator in this, or as much as anything else. How do we keep hammering away at these points that you're not hearing the real truth about climate change, you're not getting real reporting about what's happening to the economy, we're not getting both sides in election debates and that kind of thing. The low point, but the moment of truth for me in I hear a spatula. The low point.
There's nothing.
All right, okay. Just checking. The low point for me was when Barack Obama said in the presidential debates to Mitt Romney, "I suspect our positions on Social Security are very much the same." Well, yeah, I suspect so too. So, but how do we talk about this without getting people into despair rather than into action?
Well, I think it's good to raise people's consciousness about the messages that they're getting. So that's the first thing. And that's what I'm trying to do, to make people realize that you're not getting the truth or anything near it, what's being framed by corporations. But what they can do, the solution to the problems is you have to get money out of politics. And so that's the problem. I mean, you told me that when a guy comes to Congress, the first thing they tell him is that, hey, you're going to spend 4 hours a day on the phone raising funds for your next campaign, because that's the way it is. You got to raise that much money to win. And so consequently, they spend all day talking to super wealthy people. And so then their policies reflect the super wealthy people that they're talking to and begging for money all day. And the way you get money out of politics is I'm part of an organization called Wolfpack, and it was started by Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks. And what Wolfpack is dedicated to is passing a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics and have our campaigns be publicly financed, which would save us trillions of dollars in the long run, right? So the way you do that is you have to get state legislatures, 35 of them, to pass this, and you get 2/3 of the Congress to pass it. So they started in New Hampshire. They got them to pass it. They go, oh, that's a small state. Well, you'll never get a big state like California because there's oil money and defense contractors. Well, they passed it in California, too. So then the Senate also passed. They opened up debate on getting money out about a constitutional amendment to get. So things are happening. This is happening faster than I even thought it would happen. So this is something that can really work. And I'm a member of Wolfpack. And if you go to wolf-pack.com, that's a great organization actively making huge inroads to get money out of politics.
So that's WOLF, Wolfpack.
That's correct. Wolf-pack.com.
All right. It's these kinds of things that like people short circuit when they're looking stuff up. So, all right. So I would say the issue that overwhelms, subsumes, whatever word you want to use, all other issues to me also is money in politics. Because if we that I look at the polls all day long for a living. I look at the economic data. I look at the polls. It all says that if people, first of all, even with the misinformation that people are getting nowadays, they still have the right ideas more or less for the economy. A lot of times, including a majority of Republican voters, they still have the right ideas about Social Security. They do want to get money out of politics. So this is the issue of issues, I would guess. And so where did you grow up?
I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago. And the way I described it was a really blue-collar neighborhood, really blue-collar, racist. And
right.
Yeah, so that's what, and I grew up with 12 siblings. So that's informed a lot of my dad was a cop, so I hate cops. And so my dad was blue-collar, I was blue-collar. So that's kind of like, and I took a class in high school, and it was called Current Events, and our textbook was Time Magazine. Now, this is back in the 80s. And my dad, everybody loved Reagan back then. And our textbook literally was you had to read Time Magazine every week. And I remember going, wow, this Reagan guy is nothing like they make us think he is on television. He's kind of a jerk, and he's screwing over working people and demonizing the poor. And all you had to do was read Time magazine back then. You knew that stuff. But if you watched the television or listened to the radio, you almost never heard that stuff, right? So
Yeah,
that
no,
informed me. Go ahead.
And by the way, Time magazine was not a liberal publication. It was owned by the Luce family. That's Luce, not Lose. They were very conservative. This was not an organization that was looking to, you just had the facts. And by having the facts, that led you in that direction. And by the way, my own background is not that dissimilar. I grew up originally in Utica, New York, which was a blue collar industrial town, Rust Belt. It's totally devastated now by what they've done to the economy, what they've done to outsourcing. It's got basically a third of the population that it had when I was there, maybe a little around half when you consider that they resettled 16,000 refugees there because houses were basically free and the factories are falling down. So this is what they've done to us. I mean, if someone had done this with bombs, we'd be at war. But because they did it with economics, people are able to look the other way. And you're right about the racist sentiments in some of these places. This is why in the 2008 race, when Geraldine Ferraro started doing her little dog whistle things about, and I'll bet you recognize this too, and I called it out for racism, and I got criticized for it, but I know how people talk in those areas. And when they say things like, these people, they want to get ahead of us. That's what Geraldine Ferraro said. They don't want to wait their turn. They want to get ahead of us. I kind of had a good idea what they were saying, didn't you?
Oh yes, of course. There's, what I like is now they've taken away, you don't have to do dog whistle politics anymore. You don't have to do the Southern strategy anymore. You just go ahead and deny blacks the right to vote. You just go ahead and do that, and you pass a law in the light of day, and then Chuck Todd says that's just politics. That doesn't disqualify anybody, that you want to do the most un-American thing possible and deny people their right to vote. Voting, it's not, I love how people go, well, I have to show an ID when I get on a plane. I have to show an ID when I buy beer. Why shouldn't I have to show an ID when I vote? I don't know, maybe because buying beer isn't in the Constitution and it's not the linchpin of democracy, you moron. Maybe that's why you don't have to show an ID. So,
right. And you're actually, I don't know what I think about that, but you are allowed to vote drunk. Think about it.
I'm going to put that in my act. That's very good. So it's amazing to me that they're just out and out, blatantly, racistly denying people the right to vote. And you turn on Brian Williams, and he acts like it's just politics. He acts like, well, they think it's going to be, they really want to protect the integrity of the vote. That's, again, a newsman being a tool of a corporation and afraid to offend half the people he thinks are watching him, the mouth-breathing morons, right, that he's trying to keep watching his show. So he pretends that making a voter ID law, it's neutral. It could be good, could be bad. I'm neutral to it. I'm not sure about it. I'm just a newsman who makes millions of dollars from a defense contractor. What would I know about anything to do with voter IDs? I'm Brian Williams. Back to you.
Right. And by the way, if we go back to the civil rights days, and when people were marching and getting shot at and beaten up and dying for things like the right to vote for African Americans, the things that they're taking away now, we also, I wonder how these news people would have reported it in those days. Well, a poll tax that black people can't afford. Well, people just feel that it's right to offset the cost of voting. Or Bull Connor sending his fire hoses out to people who are demonstrating. Well, some people have strong opinions about keeping order on the streets. I just wonder how far they'd be willing to take this, because you know what? At the end of the day, it's not any different. The meaning, the intent, the objective is just the same now as it was back then.
Oh, no doubt about it. It's the dominant culture wanting to restrict the minorities having a voice in government. I mean, it couldn't be the more. There's nothing more un-American than that, right? That's the beauty of our country. And it's funny, these same Republicans who seem to hate taxes love a poll tax. They have no problem with taxing someone that have to go exercise their constitutional right. And it's also the same businessmen who don't want any ID to have as a condition of employment, because they want to be able to exploit you when you get to this country. They want to be able to pay you less than a living wage, and then you can't join a union or you can't vote. But if you want to go vote, then you got to have an ID. So it's gross, it's racism, it's un-American, and again, our mainstream media reports it as if it's neutral.
All right. And then we're going to have to leave it there, but the special is when again in California?
So November 7th, North Hollywood. It's a 9:30 show at the El Portal. There's going to be a link for tickets over at jimmydorcomedy.com is my website, and the tickets are free. Hope to see everybody there.
And the book is Your Country Is Just Not That Into You. We've been talking with Jimmy Dore, comedian, author, and celebrity chef. Jimmy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
RJ, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. I'm Richard RJ Eskow. We will be right back after this. This is The Zero Hour.